The story revolves around Vista Pacific Airlines Flight 7500, which is scheduled to depart from Los Angeles to Tokyo. Before we get to know the passengers, we are first introduced to the flight attendants working on this flight. This is Laura. She is involved in a secret affair with the captain of the aircraft. The other flight attendant is Susie, who arrives slightly late because she had just attended her sister's wedding. Susie is feeling a little envious of her sister, as she herself is still single and not yet married. Now we begin to meet the passengers as they start boarding the aircraft. On the upper deck, which is the first-class cabin, we meet Brad and Pia, a married couple traveling with their friends to Tokyo. Despite this vacation, Brad and Pia have already decided to file for divorce once the trip is over. Meanwhile, on the lower deck, which is the economy class, there's a newlywed couple named Rick and Liz. They are on their honeymoon. Liz is portrayed as somewhat arrogant and demanding, unwilling to sit beside just anyone. Luckily, her husband Rick is understanding and patient. Another passenger is Lance, a businessman carrying an antique wooden box. Then there's a young woman named Raquel, who is on a video call with her boyfriend just before takeoff. Her boyfriend insists that they shouldn't say "I love you" before the flight departs, claiming that doing so could bring bad luck. They agree to finish the call after she lands. However, right after saying that, her boyfriend still mouths the words "I love you," though without sound. Next we meet Jack, a man seated next to Raquel. He ignores the flight attendant's instructions and leaves his phone on even after boarding. Jack is later revealed to be a thief, as his bag is filled with several stolen phones. Then we meet Jacinta. Liz, still acting picky, feels uneasy sitting next to her. But she has no other option. In total, there are more than 100 passengers on board this flight. Before takeoff, Laura receives an emergency message from ground control, informing her that an important inspection on the plane had been skipped. She tries to contact the captain but is startled when he suddenly appears right behind her. His name is Captain Pete. He's the one having an affair with Laura, even though he already has a wife and family. Captain Pete doesn't seem too concerned about the missed inspection. At that moment, he also receives a call from his wife, making Laura feel jealous. Soon after, the plane begins its ascent and reaches a cruising altitude of 10,000 feet. Shortly after takeoff, the aircraft experiences turbulence as it passes through dense cloud layers. The turbulence doesn't last long, but it causes panic among many passengers, including Lance, the businessman. Lance starts hyperventilating and suddenly finds it difficult to breathe. Laura and Susie rush to assist him. Laura asks if any passengers on board are medical professionals. Brad, who is a medical practitioner, steps forward and heads to the economy class cabin. Rick, noticing the chaos, also helps the crew. Brad quickly begins examining Lance, who is now coughing up large amounts of blood. While Brad is assessing him, something strange occurs.
Sir?
Lance stops breathing, and the flight attendants immediately move his body to the galley to try and resuscitate him. Rick performs mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but unfortunately, all efforts fail. Lance is declared deceased. Had Lance still been alive, the captain would have performed an emergency landing. But since he had already passed away, the flight continues with medical personnel scheduled to receive the body at the airport upon arrival. Due to the situation, the crew decides to move all first-class passengers down to economy class. Although they are now seated in a different section, they continue to receive first-class services. This relocation was necessary because they had no appropriate place to store the body. Lance's body is then left alone on the upper deck. Once all passengers are settled in economy class, Raquel goes to the lavatory, carrying a pregnancy test. Meanwhile, Laura serves hot coffee to the passengers. As she walks through the cabin, she notices something disturbing. One of Lance's bloody molars has fallen out and is still lying nearby. Shocked, she slips and falls. Then she notices dried traces of Lance's blood on the surface. At the same time, Brad notices that his fingers are turning blue, indicating a possible lack of oxygen. He also sees that his bottled water has collapsed due to pressure changes. Laura quickly takes her seat and instructs all passengers to fasten their seatbelts. All the passengers rush to put on their oxygen masks. In the lavatory, Raquel begins to panic. She is struggling to breathe without access to an oxygen mask. Brad tries to alert others who are not using their masks. Meanwhile, he sees Pia, his wife, faint due to a lack of oxygen. He quickly rushes to her side to help. However, Brad himself also started experiencing oxygen deprivation. At that moment, everyone on board panicked in confusion. Suddenly, Brad spotted an emergency oxygen tank and quickly grabbed it to help his wife. Moments later, they were both able to breathe normally again. The captain then made an announcement, informing everyone that the aircraft had encountered a problem with cabin pressure. According to the onboard system, there had been a leak caused by the turbulence earlier. The issue was being handled immediately, and the cabin pressure had now returned to normal. Everyone was instructed that they could remove their oxygen masks. As Laura checked on the passengers, she found Raquel unconscious in the lavatory. She quickly administered emergency oxygen, which successfully revived her. Meanwhile, Pia thanked her husband Brad for saving her, although they both knew their divorce was still inevitable. Brad asked if they could reconsider and try to fix their marriage, but Pia was firm in her decision not to go back. While the passengers rested, Jack sneaked upstairs to the upper deck. At that time, Liz was looking at photos from their wedding and suddenly caught a glimpse of Lance's ghostly figure. She didn't say anything to her husband because she wasn't sure what she had just seen. Meanwhile, Jack had gone upstairs to approach Lance's body. Being a thief, he was tempted by the Rolex watch Lance had been wearing. He took the watch and even decided to record a video of himself with the corpse as a keepsake.
I'm just dying for you to meet him.
In the galley, Laura and Susie were cleaning up. Laura happened to glance outside and was startled to see an F-16 fighter jet flying near their aircraft. Susie, who wasn't paying much attention, mentioned that a passenger named Jack hadn't been seen in his seat for quite some time. Hearing this, Laura invited Susie to help her search for Jack. Laura asked Raquel, who was seated next to him, and she confirmed that Jack had gone upstairs. They quickly headed to the upper deck, and were shocked to find Lance's body missing from the seat. Laura panicked and urged Susie to return to the lower deck with her immediately. She rushed to report both the missing body and Jack's disappearance to the captain. She also told him about the fighter jet she had seen earlier, but the captain hadn't witnessed it himself. Raquel, meanwhile, attempted her pregnancy test again, but was suddenly overwhelmed by a strange presence. News of the missing body and Jack's disappearance spread among the passengers. Several of them began sharing stories of seeing strange apparitions after Lance's death. Brad and others began to suspect that all of this might be connected to Lance. They decided to investigate and discreetly retrieve some of Lance's remaining belongings. Back in the cockpit, the captain asked Laura if they had found anything. Laura told him they hadn't, and also used the moment to end their relationship. She encouraged Pete to focus on his family, expressing that she no longer wanted to be someone who interfered in another person's marriage. Pete, though reluctant, accepted her decision. Elsewhere, the two married couples searching Lance's belongings discovered nothing out of the ordinary in his bag, just a few small bottles containing labeled strands of hair. Not long after, Jacinta approached, having observed their actions earlier. She brought with her the antique box that Lance had carried on board, which she had been suspicious of from the beginning. They opened the box together and found a creepy-looking doll inside. An inscription revealed that the doll was a death doll, referred to as a shinigami. It turned out that Lance was a doll maker, and the hair samples were intended for the dolls he was planning to craft. He had brought the doll with him to deliver it to a customer in Tokyo. Jacinta explained that in Japanese mythology, a shinigami is a spirit of death. She added that if someone dies before their time, They must let go of all attachments in order to pass on peacefully. If they can do that, the Shinigami will come to guide them to the afterlife. She concluded that based on everything the passengers had been seeing, including ghostly sightings, Lance's spirit had not yet accepted his death, and so it continued to linger on the plane. Meanwhile, Laura went to the cargo hold, searching for Lance's suitcase. Curious, she opened it. Susie waited outside for Laura to return, but she never came back from the cargo hold. When Susie went to check, she was also disturbed by a strange force. Witnessing what happened, the two married couples from earlier immediately descended from the upper deck. Jacinta, who had fallen down, struggled to get up and move. The two couples reached the cockpit door, which was now open. Inside, they were shocked to find both the captain and the co-pilot already deceased, still wearing their oxygen masks. Meanwhile, Jacinta encountered an apparition that looked exactly like herself. The spirit told her that in order to move on to the afterlife, she had to let go of her former life. Jacinta began to understand. She slowly approached the spirit and embraced her. Back to the two couples, they were still desperate to find help. Unexpectedly, they stumbled upon Raquel's body in the lavatory. She had died. Brad accidentally tripped over her foot and fell to the floor. When he stood up and looked toward the cabin, he saw something that deeply shocked him. Rick asked what he saw, but Brad gave no response. Rick and Liz walked into the cabin to check it out themselves. Brad then called Pia to come and look as well. Inside the cabin, they discovered something horrifying. All the passengers were dead, including themselves. In that moment, they remembered what Jacinta had said, that they had to accept their death if they wanted peace in the afterlife. The two couples still hadn't fully realized that they had already passed away. The plane continued flying on autopilot. Suddenly, a television monitor turned on, showing breaking news. Flight 7500 had reportedly suffered catastrophic decompression caused by turbulence. The oxygen masks had failed to function properly, communications were cut off, and fighter jets had confirmed that there were no signs of life on board due to the lack of oxygen. Brad and Pia remembered the moment earlier when they had struggled to breathe. It turned out that they hadn't survived after all. The jet that Laura's spirit had seen was indeed an F-16 fighter jet dispatched to assess the situation. The crew on board had confirmed that there were no survivors. The plane was continuing on autopilot and would remain airborne for approximately 5 more hours before eventually crashing once it ran out of fuel. After hearing the news, the spirits of the two couples finally accepted their fate. Pia told Brad to never let her go again. She wanted her spirit to stay with his, always. After all the spirits had let go and been taken by the Shinigami, only one remained unwilling to move on. Liz, the arrogant one. At that moment, her own spirit of death finally arrived to guide her away. And with that, the film ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.